This is the first of a series of videos that I plan on doing about a variety of Cisco example labs. Some such as this one may be demonstrated on Packet Tracer in a virtual simulation, and some may be demonstrated on physical Cisco hardware. I was initially going to do these videos specifically for admins and Guardian, but decided that I would make them public as other people may be able to benefit from them as well. The first one will be very simple, and these labs will become progressively more difficult as the series continues. In this lab, I will demonstrate basic setup of a Cisco router, Dhcp pool, and setup of a switch. The end goal of this lab is to have our three PCs get IP addresses via Dhcp from the Dhcp pool running on the router, and have them be able to ping each other. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is under my network hardware section and under routers on Packet Tracer, I'm going to choose a 2811 router and place it out here in the environment. And I'm going to go over to switches and get a 2960 layer 2 switch and place it in the environment as well. And now I'm going to get two PCs. Actually, we'll do three. So we have 1, 2, 3. And we're going to configure these PCs to get their IPs via Dhcp. So double clicking on these, we'll go to config, and under gateway DNS IPv4, we're going to set this to Dhcp and close this out and repeat this on the other PCs. Our last one. Okay, so now once we get the Dhcp pool set up on the router and we connect everything together, these should in theory get IP addresses via Dhcp. So what we're going to do is come over here to connections now and choose copper straight through Ethernet cable. Click on the router and then connect the first into fast Ethernet 00. Click on the switch and we're going to connect it to Gigabit Ethernet 01 on the switch. So those are our two interfaces we're going to use. And right now we see the link lights on this is red. The reason for that is there's no communication between these, as by default on the router the interface is shut down and it's not even operating. So that's the reason for that, but we'll fix that in a second. And for now we're going to leave the PCs disconnected, and you'll see why in a minute. We're going to connect them after we configure our router and Dhcp pool so that we can just plug them in and they'll get the IP addresses instead of trying to get IPs without any router configuration. So I'm going to double click on the router and go to CLI. Also we'll make sure it's turned on, which we see it is based on the green light. So it is all turned on, and we'll go to CLI. And the first thing we see, because there's no configuration on this router, is would you like to enter initial configuration dialog? So we're going to choose no. So I'm going to hit no and hit enter. And now it says press return to get started, so I'm going to hit return on the keyboard. And now we're into our CLI on here. So the first thing we're going to do is get into enable mode. So we're just going to type en. And now we're going to go into configuration. So we're going to do conf t. Now we're in configuration. Now the first thing I want to do configuring this is change the host name of the router. So this is the host name right now, it's just labeled router, just like how they are out of the box. And I'm going to change the host name to demo router. So I'm going to use command hostname. I'm going to call it demo router. And we'll make this bigger. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is set a password for enabling the command line. So that is an enable password. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do enable secret, and I'm going to set mine in this example to Cisco enable. So that's going to be our enable password. And when you use the secret command that makes the password encrypted and not viewable when you go to view the configuration of the router. So that's always the safest way to do it. Instead of doing enable password Cisco enable, it's always best to do enable secret Cisco enable. Or it doesn't have to be a Cisco enable. You'd want to set it more secure in the real world, but you can set this to whatever you want. Anyway, so the next thing we're going to do is set a password for the console, which is just when you log into the router. The password you have to enter in before you get to the enablement part. So we're going to do line console 0, hit return. So now we're configuring the console settings, and for that we're going to do password, and you can set it whatever you want now. For this one I'm going to do Cisco login, but again, you could make it whatever you want, and you'd really want to make it more secure in the real world. And now to set this password to actually log into the router, we're just going to run login, and now we can exit this part of the configuration. Now you cannot, when you set a password for the console, you cannot set a secret password initially. So like how we did secret here, you can't type secret here. You have to type password. There's no option for typing secret there. So the way you fix that is we're going to encrypt the password to make it the same way as when you run the secret command. We're just going to encrypt the password to where it can't be viewed in the configuration, so that adds another layer of security. So for that, we're going to run service password encryption. I can just hit tab there and fill in the rest of the command, and I'll use that throughout this demo. And we're going to hit return, and now it's encrypted that password and made it a secret password. Now the next thing that's always good to set up on any Cisco device is no IP domain lookup. And what that does for us is if you accidentally type in the wrong command, it's not going to try to find it somewhere on the network in a DNS server. So that just prevents issues and getting stuck in your command line. It just is more of a convenience thing more than anything. Okay, so now we're going to configure our interface on this router. So what I'm going to do is interface fast Ethernet 00, hit enter. The first thing you have to do is enable this interface. So I'm going to do no shutdown. And now as we can see, it's been changed state to up. So I'm going to hit return one more time on my keyboard. Okay. And now I have to set an IP address for this interface on the router. So I'm going to set an IP address of 192.168.1.1 with a class C subnet mask. So I'm going to type IP address and then 192.168.1.1, and now I have to set the subnet mask, which I'm going to do class C. So I'm going to do 255.255.255.0 and hit enter. And now I'm going to set the default router, or sorry, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to exit configuring this interface. And now we're going to create the DHCP pool. So I'm going to do IP DHCP pool, and now we're going to name it. So you can name it whatever. I'm going to call it workstations for this example. Press return. And now we have to specify what network we want this DHCP pool for. So on the interface, we set our IP address of 192.168.1.1. So that's the network we're going to use. It's also on the class C subnet mask. So I'm going to type network 192.168.1. Now I'm not going to type .1, but rather .0, because that specifies that network, because we're not putting it on an IP address, but rather a network. So it's very important to put that last part of your IP address, that D section, as a 0. And then we do have to specify the subnet mask. So same subnet mask as up here. we're going to hit return. And now for this DHCP pool, we're going to set the default router, which is going to be, in this example, I'm going to run default router. It's going to be 192.168.1.1, and you don't have to specify a subnet mask for this. And that's it there. So now we're going to exit configuring the DHCP pool. And now we have to exclude the DHCP pool from trying to assign the address 192.168.1.1, because remember, the router has that IP address. So we don't want it to try to give another device getting an IP via DHCP that address, because we'd have a conflict. So what we're going to do is exclude that address, and we're going to run IP DHCP excluded address, and in the IP that we want to exclude. So we're going to do 192.168.1.1 because we don't want it to assign that address. Got a space there. Okay, we're going to hit return, and now we're done configuring the router. So we're going to do the command end, and we're going to hit return one more time. And now we're back to the beginning. Now it is very crucial, because right now the configuration that we just wrote for this router is running, but if we restarted the router, we turned it off, we turned it back on again, it would be basically reset to the factory default, and it's going to not save the changes that we just made. So it is very important to actually write this running configuration to the flash. And how you do that is a very simple command, WR, press return, and now it actually has saved it. So now if we lose power to this router and turn it back on, we're going to have our configuration that we changed, which is very important. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this CLI here, because we're done with the router. And as you can see, we have green link lights now running between our router and switch, because now that interface is enabled and it's actually communicating. So now what we're going to do is configure our switch. So I'm going to double click the switch and go to CLI. I'm going to press return, and here we go. So same thing on the switch. I'm going to go into enable mode, and now configuration, configure terminal, press enter, and now I'm going to change the host name from switch. I'm going to make it demo switch. So I'm going to do host name demo switch. Now we've changed the host name. And now again, we want to set passwords to make the switch more secure. So we're going to do line console 0. And I'm going to set the console password. So I'm going to do password Cisco login. And I'm going to do login to set as a login password and exit this. And now I'm going to set the enable password. So I'm going to do like the last one, enable secret Cisco enable. And now we've done that. And again, I want to disable the IP domain lookup. So I'm going to do no IP domain lookup and run that. And now we're going to create a VLAN, even though we're not necessarily VLANing via a trunk from our router to the switch, but I'm going to create a VLAN that is untagged throughout the switch just to appropriately match ports to one another on the switch. So in this example, I'm just going to create VLAN 5. You could create whatever number you wanted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do VLAN 5. And now on this VLAN, I'm going to give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to also call it workstations, because that's what this VLAN is for. So I'm going to do VLAN. I'm going to do name. And I'm going to type workstations. and we've called it workstations, and I'm going to exit configuration for this VLAN. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign my interfaces on my switch, the switch ports, to this VLAN 5. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do interface, and I'm not going to do just one at a time, I'm going to do a range of them. So I'm going to do all 24 on the front of the switch, the fast Ethernet ones. So the way I'm going to do that is interface range, and then fast Ethernet 0/1, and I'm going to do space, a hyphen, and then 24. So I'm going to do interface 0/1 through 24. I'm going to hit enter. So I want to make sure all of these ports are up and running. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to do no shut, and now I'm going to set these as access ports. So I'm going to do switch port mode access, and now I'm going to set the access VLAN, which is VLAN 5 that we previously created. So I'm going to do switch port access VLAN 5, hit enter, and then I'm going to exit configuration for these ports. So now fast Ethernet ports 1 through 24 on the front of the switch are set up, and now we're going to set up the Gigabit Ethernet port that is connected to our router. So for that, I'm going to do interface. I'm not going to type range this time, just because I'm not doing a range, I'm doing a single port. And I'm going to do Gigabit Ethernet, and it's going to be 0/1. Hit return, and again I want this one to be enabled, so I'm going to do no shut. And now I'm also going to set this one as an access port because we're not trunking, so I'm going to do switch port mode access, and then I'm going to set the access VLAN, so switch port access VLAN 5. And now we're done configuring the switch. So I'm going to do end, hit return again. Now again I'm going to do WR to write this running configuration to the flash. I'm going to hit return, and there we go, so we're done. So now I can go ahead and get out of the CLI of the switch, and right now we're going to see it is trying to make a link there. So this is going to turn green. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to connect our PCs to the switch. So I'm going to come and choose another straight through Ethernet cable. Click on the switch. Choose a fast Ethernet port. Click on the computer, and click on fast Ethernet. So this will also turn green. And I'm going to do a second one. I'm going to click on the switch, fast Ethernet 2, and then fast Ethernet 0 on the computer. Choose another patch cable, click on the switch, click on fast Ethernet 3, click on the computer, and then click fast Ethernet 0. So now what we're going to see happen here is we're going to see these link lights. So there's our first one. And when we hover over the computer, we can see the IP address. So right now it has an IP address of 169.254.70.213, and that's going to change when it gets an IP with DHCP. So we're going to give it a minute because it's going to take some time. So that's just the default IP. This last one is still linking. So we'll keep checking in on it. It still has the default IP. So what we should have is a 192.168.1.something IP address. Okay, so our link light just changed. There we go. So we have 192.168.2, and we have /24 because we have the class C subnet. And then on this one we have 192.168.1.3, and on this one we have this one has not gotten its IP address yet, so we're going to give it a minute. There we go. 192.168.1.4. So now we know that this one, I'm going to change the name of it. I'm just going to set this one, going to rename it to 192.168.1.2. Alright, okay. I'm going to do this one as IP 192.168. And this is not required, I'm just doing this to mark them. Okay. So now I've labeled these. So now if we double click on a PC, we can actually go onto the PC here and go into command prompt, just like Windows. And if I do ping, so right now I'm using this PC, and I ping this IP address, I should get a response. So if I do ping 192.168.1.3, and hit enter, we can see we're getting replies and that they're communicating. So now if I try that on another PC, let's say I try the second one, okay, and I want to ping this third PC, if I do ping 192.168.1.4, we can see we also now get a response. So these PCs are actually communicating through the switch and router, and they can actually communicate with each other by pinging. So they're all on the same network, and we have successfully configured our router, switch, and assigned our IPs to our computers with DHCP. So this is the very first example of these Cisco demos. I hope that anyone trying to learn Cisco and basic iOS skills was able to benefit from this. If you actually have physical Cisco hardware, it is exactly the same configuration and setup on your Cisco hardware. The interfaces may be named slightly differently depending on what model router or switch you have, but for the most part, this simulation is very similar to physical Cisco hardware. So you can replicate this on a physical Cisco lab if you wish, or you can also follow along on Packet Tracer. So I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.